The day my parents' will was read, I lost everything at once. My brother walked away with a mansion worth nearly $1 million. I was handed a rotten cabin no one wanted. That same night, the woman I thought would stand beside me threw the ring back in my face and walked out the door, humiliated, abandoned, and hollow. Kevin, realized I had been left with nothing but a cruel reminder of how little I mattered. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee, the kind of air that pressed heavy on your chest. The lawyer's voice carried a finality that sliced through the silence like a blade. Brian was handed a mansion in California, worth nearly $1 million. Along with most of the financial assets, my share was a crumbling cabin in the mountains of Colorado, something spoken of so casually it barely filled a line on the page. The silence that followed was deafening. Brian leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at his lips. He reached over and patted my shoulder, the way someone would console a child who'd lost a game he never had a chance of winning. The weight of that gesture burned more than the words themselves. When Emily heard the news that evening, her face flushed with a fury I had never seen before. She ripped the ring from her finger, slammed it on the table, and spat words that carved into me deeper than any insult from childhood. You have no future. I will not waste my life with someone who will always live in another man's shadow. The door slammed behind her, leaving the sound of my own breath echoing in the emptiness. In the span of days, I had lost my parents, my inheritance, and the woman I thought I would spend forever with. That night, in a silent apartment stripped of warmth, I stared at the deed to a cabin that looked more like a curse than a gift. I held it in my hands, asking myself whether I should burn it, sell it, or face whatever truth waited for me in the cold mountains. The town in Colorado felt frozen in time, swallowed by snow and silence. The truck that dropped me off rumbled away, leaving only the crunch of my boots against the icy path that led to the cabin. From the outside, it leaned like it had given up years ago, roof sagging, walls scarred by mold, windows fogged and cracked. Inside, the smell of damp wood and mildew struck me like a slap. Every step across the warped floorboards sent out a groan, as if the house itself resented my presence. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling into a rusted pot, and the air was so heavy I could taste decay on my tongue. I lowered myself onto a broken chair that barely held my weight and let out a bitter laugh. So this is what I'm worth? The sound of my own voice, hollow in the empty room, felt crueler than the silence. I forced myself to start clearing the dust, moving fallen beams, trying to carve out a space where I could breathe. That's when I opened a drawer in a rickety desk shoved against the wall. Beneath layers of grime, I found a piece of paper, brittle, edges torn, lines faded, unfolding it carefully. I realized it was a map. Red ink marked an X deep in the mountains nearby. My pulse quickened. I didn't know what it meant, but something in my gut told me this cabin wasn't the worthless joke it appeared to be. Later that afternoon, as the sun bled into the horizon, I sat on the cabin's porch nursing the sting of the cold when a voice called out. An old man, wrapped in layers of wool, shuffled toward me. He introduced himself as Mr. Dawson, a neighbor who'd lived in the valley for decades. He peered at the cabin with a knowing look. Your grandfather, Elias Wright, built more than just walls here, he said. He made his fortune in silver once. People say he hid things no one ever found. His words hit me harder than the wind. I had grown up believing my family story was nothing but modest survival. Now, this stranger hinted at a legacy buried in secrets. That night, I couldn't rest. Lantern in hand, I combed through the cabin again. Near the center of the floor, a loose plank caught my foot. Kneeling down, I pried it open. My fingers found an iron handle embedded in the wood. With one sharp pull, a section of floor lifted, revealing a black void beneath. I hovered at the edge, the beam of my flashlight trembling as it pierced the darkness. The air rising from below was damp, cold, and heavy with earth. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared into the hidden passage. For the first time, I felt as though I was standing at the threshold of not just a secret, but the truth of who I really was, and the path that could change everything. The storm outside howled against the cabin walls, snow pelting the windows like fists, but the only sound that mattered was the groan of the old floorboards as I pulled open the hidden hatch. The beam of my flashlight cut into the blackness, and the smell of earth and rust drifted up. I gripped the iron handle and lowered myself onto the rickety steps, each creak echoing like voices from the past. At the bottom, the narrow cellar opened into a chamber lined with crates and rusted chests. Dust clung to everything, but the moment I pried open the first lid, time seemed to freeze. Bundles wrapped in cloth spilled heavy coins of gold and silver. Another chest revealed jewelry that glimmered even under the weak light. My hands shook as I lifted a brittle folder filled with land deeds and mining claims. "Why didn't they ever tell me?" I whispered, though the darkness gave no answer. Among the documents, one detail tightened my chest. Many were still registered under Elias Wright, my grandfather, never officially passed down. Their legitimacy was clouded in uncertainty. Digging further, I uncovered a weathered notebook. Its pages were filled with meticulous records of silver trades and land deals dating back decades. The sheer volume told me my family had once commanded a fortune that had been buried out of sight. I sank back against the cold stone wall, heart pounding. The cabin I thought was a cruel insult held wealth that eclipsed everything Brian had ever flaunted. Yet, as the truth sank in, so did the fear. This wasn't just treasure, it was a dangerous inheritance. If anyone else discovered it, I could lose not just the fortune, but everything I had left. The blizzard raged for days, and I stayed cloistered in the cabin, mind racing with how to protect what I had found. My phone buzzed, and Brian's mocking voice spilled through the line. "So, how's that shack of yours holding up? Warm enough in there? Or do you need me to send firewood?" I bit back my words, fingers curling around the crumpled map I had kept close, my silence only fueling his arrogance. That evening, a new message appeared on my screen. "Emily, I've been thinking, maybe we can start over. Let's talk." For a flicker of a moment, I felt the pull of old memories, but suspicion drowned it quickly. She hadn't missed me. She had smelled opportunity. When I returned from a supply run to the town the next day, my heart stopped cold. The cabin's window pane was shattered, the desk drawers pulled out, contents scattered across the floor. I raced to the hatch, relief washing over me when I saw my careful disguise still intact. The cellar remained untouched, but outside, in the fresh snow, tracks led away into the woods. The prints were heavy, deliberate. Someone had been watching, waiting. My secret was no longer safe. Whether it was Brian or someone he'd sent, the storm outside wasn't the only danger closing in. The walls of the cabin, once just rotten wood, now felt like the thin skin of a vault about to be breached. The storm had swallowed the town by the time I trudged into the small law office, clutching a folder of brittle documents. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, spreading the papers out under a yellow lamp. A local historian leaned in, brushing dust from a deed with gloved fingers. Their voices were calm, almost too calm, as they explained what I already suspected. The collection of gold, jewelry, and claims tied to silver mines was worth tens of millions. But then came the blow that made my stomach knot. Several deeds still bore only my grandfather's name, never officially transferred. The historian warned me that without airtight succession, the claims could be contested. If word spread, Brian could file suit, dragging me into a war I wasn't prepared for. I left their office with the folder hugged tight to my chest, snow biting at my face, the truth weighing heavier than the storm. This was no longer just an inheritance. It was a weapon that could cut me as easily as it could protect me. By the time I reached the cabin, night had already fallen. The front door stood slightly ajar, snow drifting in. My pulse surged as I scanned the ground, fresh boot prints stamped deep into the white, leading to the woods. Inside, nothing appeared missing, yet the air felt invaded, tainted. Then, near the doorframe, I saw it, an envelope tucked into the wood. Inside, a single sheet, written in a hurried scrawl. "We know what you're keeping. Be careful." My blood turned to ice. Someone was watching, and they were closer than I dared imagine. The cabin groaned in the wind that night as I tore through the old bookcase, desperate for answers. A dusty Bible slid free, and from between its pages fell a folded envelope, edges yellowed, handwriting instantly familiar. My mother's, hands trembling. I opened it. Her words spilled across the page like a balm and a blade all at once. She wrote that Brian had always lived for appearances, chasing praise and showmanship. I, though overlooked, carried the patience and steadiness to guard what truly mattered. The cabin, she said, was not meant as an insult, but a test, a place where truth and trust would be revealed in time. Tears blurred the ink as the weight of years lifted from my shoulders. Every slight, every dismissal, every cruel word from Brian or Emily dissolved under the certainty that my parents had believed in me all along. They had chosen me. The moment barely had time to settle before headlights cut across the frosted window. An engine idled, too close, too deliberate. My chest tightened as gravel crunched outside. A shadow moved past the glass. Then came the sharp rap of knuckles against the cabin door, followed by a voice I knew too well, dripping with fury. "We need to talk, right now." Brian had arrived. The wind outside screamed against the wooden walls, snow thrashing at the windows like it was desperate to break in. Inside, the fire in the hearth spat sparks, throwing shadows across the room just as Brian shoved the door open. His eyes burned, jaw clenched tight, his boots stamping the snow into the cabin floor as if he had every right to be there. He wasted no time. "You really think you deserve it all?" he snarled, stepping closer until I could feel the heat of his breath. I was the one they were proud of. I was the one they trusted. Not you. His words dripped with venom, each syllable meant to remind me of every moment I had been overlooked. I didn't rise to his fury. I steadied myself against the chair by the fire and met his glare. "You're wrong," I said quietly but firmly. "They did trust me. I've seen the deeds, the mining claims, everything they left behind, and more than that. I found her letter." For the first time, his smirk faltered. He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the lantern that sat there. "Don't play games with me. You'll split it, or I'll drag you into court. You won't stand a chance." His voice rose, bouncing off the cabin walls, but his threats didn't shake me the way they once would have. I reached into the folder I had kept hidden, pulled out the weathered envelope, and laid it on the table between us. The firelight flickered across the fragile paper as I unfolded it, my voice steady as I read aloud the words that had changed everything. "Kevin is the only one who can keep this safe. Please forgive us for how it seemed." The room went still. The crackling fire became the only sound. Brian's fists clenched at his sides, his face flushing red with anger, but his eyes betrayed something else. Fear. Maybe even disbelief. He looked at the letter as though it had betrayed him too. The flames cast long, jagged shadows across his face, highlighting every trace of frustration, every ounce of power slipping from his grasp. For once, the silence belonged to me, and in that silence, Brian had no weapon left but his rage, which now seemed powerless against the truth laid bare on the table between us. The storm had eased by morning, though the roads into town were still buried under ice and slush. I carried the folder beneath my coat, as if it were the only shield I had left, every step toward the law office heavier than the last. The lawyer greeted me with a cautious nod, ushering me into a cramped room where the wood stove ticked faintly in the corner. Brian was already there, arms crossed, jaw tight, pacing the floor like a predator denied its prey. The lawyer spread the documents across the table. He examined the mining claims, the maps, the brittle ledgers, and finally the letter. His eyes lingered on the handwriting, and he leaned back with a slow breath. "This is clear enough," he said. "Even with the irregularities, the intent is undeniable. Your parents meant for you to inherit this." Brian slammed his fist on the table. "This is nonsense. Those claims were never transferred. They're still tied to grandfather. This doesn't hold water in court. I'll sue him until he has nothing left." His voice rattled the window panes, but the lawyer didn't flinch. "You can try," the lawyer replied evenly, "but you won't win. The evidence of intent, especially this letter, outweighs your argument. Any judge would see it, at best. You'd waste time and money. At worst, you'd expose yourself as a man clawing at something that was never meant to be yours. The words cut through the room, sharp and final. Brian's face flushed crimson, his mouth twisting as if he had swallowed poison. He turned on me, eyes blazing. You think this makes you better than me? You think one pathetic letter changes everything? He shook his head violently, pointing a finger inches from my face. You're still nothing without this. Remember that. I didn't answer. His fury no longer had a hold on me. He stormed out, the door slamming so hard the walls trembled, leaving behind nothing but the stench of his resentment. For a long moment, the lawyer and I sat in silence, the only sound the crackle of the stove. Then he gathered the papers and handed them back to me with a small, respectful nod. It's yours. Protect it well. When I stepped outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner, as though the storm had taken more than snow with it. I made my way back toward the cabin, clutching the letter close. That night, as I sorted the documents again by the fire, another knock came at the door, not the harsh pounding of my brother, but a hesitant, almost pleading tap. I opened it to find Emily standing there, bundled against the cold, eyes red from crying. She reached for my hand before I could speak. I don't care about the money, she whispered. I don't care about the land or the cabin. I just want you. Please, let's start over. For a moment, I studied her face, searching for the woman I once believed in. But all I saw was the echo of her betrayal, the way she had flung my future back at me the night the will was read. I pulled my hand free and shook my head slowly. No, I said, voice steady, stronger than I'd ever heard it from myself. You wanted me when I had nothing, and you left. Now you want me because I have something, and I won't let you in again. I don't need love that depends on fortune. Her lips trembled as tears filled her eyes. She turned without another word, her figure swallowed by the falling snow. I closed the door, the latch clicking shut like the final stroke of a gavel. For the first time, justice didn't just belong to the past, it belonged to me. The snow outside drifted down in soft silence, cloaking the mountains in white. Inside, the cabin no longer sagged under decay. It stood firm, its roof patched, its windows clear, its walls warmed by firelight. The place that once mocked me with rot and emptiness now breathed with strength, as though it too had found a second life. I sat by the hearth, the flames painting the room in amber glow, holding the letter I had read so many times it had nearly become part of me. My mother's words no longer stung, they steadied me. Every line reminded me that trust had been there all along, even when I couldn't see it. The journey replayed in my mind, the humiliation of the will, the betrayal that gutted me, the nights when despair was the only companion I had, then the hidden cellar, the treasures, the letter, the confrontations that forced me to stand straight when I once would have cowered. Each step had carved away the doubt, leaving behind a man unafraid of his own worth. The cabin had been more than timber and stone. It had been the crucible that remade me. No longer a symbol of abandonment, it now stood as proof that I was chosen. I stared into the fire and whispered, I'll protect this. I won't fail you. And then, turning inward to the silence, I left a question hanging for anyone who might listen. If your parents left you a broken cabin hiding a fortune, would you sell it for the world's approval, or honor the trust they placed in you?